Welcome into the PFF podcast. It is your midweek mailbag edition. Steve Palazzolo back here with Sam Monson. This is our fun, maybe my favorite podcast of the week. We're doing 4 all week. This might be the best one, Sam.
Well, it was last week because we had the greatest idea to hit football since the forward pass suggested to us. And we have another one this week that's pretty good. So, yeah, so far, the mailbag entries we're getting for this have been pretty impressive.
Yeah, I have to appreciate our listeners. You guys are doing a heck of a job giving us content. You guys fuel this show. And if you guys want to get in on the action, it's over at podcasts@profootballfocus.com. You guys can email us your questions. Of course, you can hit us up on Twitter at PFF_Sam and at PFF_Steve. If you guys didn't hear last week's episode, it's what we call the old evergreen episode. I feel like we'll be pushing back to this one for years to come. The new way of throwing a Hail Mary, which we do think is unstoppable. We got into depth on it. So we'll have some great stuff again today. Before we dive in, I want to pay some bills and tell you guys about our friends over at DraftKings.com. Football season has begun, but it's not too late to get closer to the game you love with DraftKings 1 week fantasy football. This Sunday, DraftKings is hosting a $100,000 pick'em contest that is totally free to enter. Pick'em is the newest way to play 1 week fantasy football, and drafting your team is faster than ever. They'll put the players into tiers, 8 tiers. All you have to do is select one player from each tier. Very simple. Choose between public contests with big cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against a group of friends. DraftKings also has beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of similar skill level. The best part is you get to draft a new team each week without any commitment. So get to DraftKings.com now and use the promo code PFF to play in DraftKings free contest with $100,000 on the line. That's promo code PFF to compete for your share of $100,000 in total prizes. The contest is totally free to enter, so why wouldn't you try? DraftKings, the game inside the game. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. All right, Sam, before we dive into the questions, we did have a topic that you and I were discussing. I feel like it's our own contribution to the podcast here. I'll ask you the question because it's just to keep it in the same format here. It's something I've noticed when watching Marcus Peters of the Kansas City Chiefs, and we wanted to touch on it the other day, and we didn't get a chance to. This past Sunday against the Los Angeles Chargers, Peters had an interception, dropped another interception, and actually deflected another pass that nearly led to an interception. This guy's been making plays since he came into the league. He's also given up a lot of plays as well, but I think that's kind of what he's developed into, this playmaker who, he's going to give up a little bit, but man, is he a great playmaker. And on his interception, his interception of Phillip Rivers and then the near interception, he will peel off his man and make plays on the ball. And it's not always pure man coverage, but he's got this unbelievable feel for covering a receiver and then going to make a play when another receiver is targeted in and around his area. And it's not just playing pure zone coverage and passing off zones. This is like he's supposed to be in man coverage, and he peels off and makes other plays. Have you seen this on film? How common is this? How good is he at it? What makes him so unique in this regard?
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that does that more or better than Marcus Peters in today's NFL. It's a real interesting skill, and it's what makes these ball hawk players in the secondary. That's why they're good, because they're able to read the play, they're able to diagnose what the quarterback is doing and head to where he's going to go with the ball, even if his eyes don't necessarily lead them directly there. So you typically see it from zone players. It's what zones are almost designed to do, is that they position players in certain parts of the field and let those guys have their eyes on the quarterback and have the quarterback take those guys to the football rather than trying to stick man on man and get involved in the play that way. So you often see it in college in particular. Teams break out a zone play, and it's just like witchcraft to the college quarterback. Doesn't see it coming, just puts the ball in the air because he's aiming at a receiver, and there's a guy sitting there in the zone that guy's running into, just steps in front, easy pass.
Right.
It happened to Jared Goff back when he played Washington State, I think, and they just ran cover 2 for the first quarter, and it was Goff. It looks like he'd never seen it before. It was complete alien, bizarre stuff that he was running into. Just tossed the ball straight to a cover 2 cornerback a couple of times.
So Sean Watson's done that.
Yeah.
He did that quite a few times at Clemson.
What makes Marcus Peters, I think, special is that he will do that playing man coverage, which you're not supposed to do for a start.
Right.
One of the main differences between zone coverage and man coverage is when you're playing zone, you have your eyes to the quarterback. So you're backing up the receivers in front of you, and you can look at the quarterback and still see the receiver out of your peripheral vision, and you're guarding an area of the field. When you're playing man coverage, typically you're turning your back on the quarterback, keeping your eyes on the receiver and playing the receiver. And only when you have a good feel for what his route is do you turn and look for the ball that should be arriving at that point. You're not really having your eyes back on the quarterback to figure out what's going on, because as soon as you do that, you lose where the receiver is, and that's where your wide open coverage busts are. So a lot of the times you see young cornerbacks get in trouble by peeking in the backfield, trying to keep an eye on where the quarterback's going, and they completely lose track of the receiver they're trying to cover because they don't have their hands on him, and he just makes a cut, and these guys are still looking inside of the quarterback and just run off into the secondary somewhere. Peters is really good at, for a start, I think the Chiefs are disguising some of this, and they're doing these man looks, but they're letting Peters play technique that allows him to kind of bail and keep his eyes on the quarterback. But I think he's also very good at, in particular on deep routes, keeping his hands on his receiver, running down the field, but then keeping his eyes in the backfield, looking for a route that's going to break underneath into the space that those guys are running off. That's
the unique part. Right, yeah. That's the very difficult part where, again, most guys are going to turn and run with their deep route at some point because you're facing a fast receiver where he's just staying on top of it, but still eyeballing the quarterback.
Yeah, and we went through a lot of these plays that kind of flashed into the memory of Marcus Peters, and some of it is also understanding route concepts. You don't need to run away with your receiver if the route concept that's developing there, if you understand what it is. So right. We saw the one that Tom Brady almost threw him an interception last season, and
it was playoffs 2015. He almost bait it. It was a weird concept that the Patriots ran too, where the receivers are almost running into each other, but Peters had that feel to break on the throw to the slot when he was really covering the
exactly.
outside.
Well, he just understood the route concept. It's like what they're showing me here there's no reason I need to run this off because the guy that's cutting right in front of me is going to be, I'm standing right where that's coming. If I just have a quick look at the quarterback, if it's coming to this route, I've got it.
Right.
And that's what nearly happened. And the same thing was true with a couple of these plays. He understands when he needs to back off and to do what the offense wants him to do, and when it's not necessary by where he's aligned. So I think he's a really dangerous cornerback because you need to understand when it is he's likely to be involved in the play, and when it is what you're putting out there in front of him is actually going to take him away from what you want to hit.
So that's the point. I think that's really a good one there. The play that sticks out to me, Teddy Bridgewater, he picked him off 2 years ago as well, and it was similar. His guy's running a deep route. He's supposed to be running with him. There's a crosser coming in behind him. It's a pretty classic cover 3 type of beater, and he's playing that cover 3 off man type of technique. And Bridgewater just missed his throw. It's a pass that was just a little bit in front on the crosser. It was not Peters' man that he was targeting. It should have just been a pass that was just thrown a little bit in front, falls incomplete. Before you know it, Peters is there, peeled off his man, running the deep route, and picks it off. So, yeah, I think we're at the point where quarterbacks have to say, look, there's never a cornerback here on this type of play. He should be completely cleared out. That's why you run clear out routes, to take a cornerback with you. But Peters is that guy that kind of just has a feel for when to not get cleared out and come back and make a play. So quarterbacks have to worry about this now.
And the question we started off with is, I mean, should the quarterback even be blamed for this? Because most cornerbacks are not going to be there. They're going to get run off by the deep route, and they're just not going to be a factor on this play. If the guy is there when he's not supposed to be, is that even a bad play by the quarterback?
Right. You're clouding the quarterback's reads that, he will never run this play and expect that player to be there.
So we started going through the tape and looking if you could honestly expect Marcus Peters to be there given how this was breaking down. And the bottom line with him is that he was playing a technique that allows him to do this. He was playing with this bail technique that allows him to have his eyes in on the quarterback, not turning his back and running away. At which point, when you understand the kind of player he is, Phillip Rivers this week, he has to be aware that this is possible. You can't just put the ball in the air as if it's any other cornerback. You need to look at him, look at the technique he's playing, and understand that from where he is, he can see this crossing route coming in that's going to be underneath him. So even though on the chalkboard he shouldn't be there, he has the ability and the position and the opportunity to react to this. So I can't just ignore him on this play. He is a factor there, even though he shouldn't be based on the X's and O's and how this is drawn up.
Yeah, so you have to treat him differently. Could teams also bait him a little bit?
Yeah.
Run the out route underneath him and just say, look, we're gonna keep our receiver on a streak, maybe pump him and go. And
definitely.
I mean, this is just a fascinating cat and mouse game that I want to keep an eye on as we go, because like we said, there's a handful of plays through the years where you're just like, man, Marcus Peters is a playmaker. His feel for the game's incredible, but also a handful of plays where he does get caught peeking and guys are running behind him. So I'm sure Kansas City will certainly take the big plays that he's creating, and it does seem like, to your point, they're letting him play with that bit of flexibility. Phillip Rivers, besides the plays where he got baited, did look pretty bad on Sunday in general.
Awful.
Underthrew a couple deep balls directly into coverage as well. So that was a poor game overall from Rivers. Do also have to credit Peters for what he did. But I think that's a fun little discussion.
On the flip side, randomly, Alex Smith also started to put the ball in the air a bit more. I mean, we talked earlier in the season about how this new deep threat, Alex Smith, it wasn't really any different. They were just scheming guys wide open. But I posted one on Twitter, a deep shot to Tyreek Hill. Okay, he missed it. It was out of bounds. But he read just a single coverage. He understood the safety was in the middle of the field, leaning the other side, saw Tyreek Hill one-on-one on the outside and thought, to hell with it. I'm putting this ball in the air. And at the point he released the ball, Tyreek Hill wasn't wide open. He was getting level with his receiver, but it wasn't a sure thing that we've talked about before. The plays where Alex Smith will put the ball in the air, the sure thing that I know this guy is wide open. It was a conventional NFL read where he looked at this guy. It was a favorable
matchup. Thrown with a little anticipation. Yeah.
He saw the favorable matchup and he thought, I'm going to give it a shot. And okay, he missed the shot, but I think that's development. That's the thing we've never seen from Alex Smith, is the willingness to do that.
There's something to him taking it, and I know a lot of people trash Alex Smith for just dinking and dunking and taking the short stuff, but he's good at the short stuff as far as accuracy and giving guys yak opportunities and stuff. If he can, I'm still coming down to if he can just hit a couple downfield passes.
This was
per game.
Missing piece of his game. I mean, even if we've said before, even if he just takes the ones that are schemed wide open, if he's able to hit those this year, that makes him better. But if he actually starts taking these ones as well, where it's not wide open, but the matchup is in your favor, so you take a shot at it. I mean, that's huge. If they can get him doing that reliably this season, this will be the best Alex Smith we have ever seen, which it has been so far through 3 weeks.
Yep, we want to see him keep it up. All right, guys, getting into our questions. Podcasts, plural, podcasts at profootballfocus.com. We had Gary with 2 questions that we're going to answer, and he specifically addressed them to Sam.
Yeah.
So I'll just read them to you and let you work?
I think so.
I sit these out?
Give the people what they want, and apparently they want me on this occasion.
Fine. My ego is taking a hit today, but 3 questions for Sam. I'm going to only read 2 of them because one of them we're going to dance around. We might actually dance around the second one as well. Regardless of position, Sam, what non-rookie is dominating and should be a household name, but isn't?
I like it. I think Delaney Walker should be a much bigger name than he currently is. When I was watching games this week with our fearless leader and founder, well, he's not the fearless leader anymore. That's Chris.
Founder only.
Founder only now, Neil Hornsby. Neil said, I think Delaney Walker is the best tight end in football. Now, I think that's going a bit far because Rob Gronkowski is the best tight end in football.
Gronk is still walking.
Yes.
Travis Kelce's walking faster than Gronk. I mean, there's still a couple guys.
Look, I might give him 2 Gronk. I might give him the Kelce thing, but Rob Gronkowski still exists, therefore no. But the point is, for him to even have that kind of statement uttered about him, I think that gives you some indication of how good he actually is. I think Delaney Walker, one of the best blocking tight ends in football. Some of the best plays he's made this year have been springing guys on blocks on the outside. Came back, destroyed Reggie Nelson for Marcus Mariota to get in for a touchdown was that week 1? Against the Raiders.
Yes, yeah, week 1.
He's made some fantastic blocks, and he's a good receiver. I mean, he almost pulled a pass off the turf, this shoelace thing that Mariota threw him this week that was a horrible ball. And it was one of those where He probably caught it, but there was enough ground involved that, the officials didn't give it. But he's got good hands. He's a great blocker. He seems to actually enjoy blocking, or at least enjoy springing those big plays for blocks, which is so important, especially for this Titans running game.
He's never really had a down year as a blocker.
No,
either.
Sometimes
sometimes you have guys, we've talked about Martellus Bennett, where it comes and goes a little bit. It's been there his entire career, and he's continued to progress as a receiving threat.
Absolutely. So I think Delaney Walker is one of the best tight ends in the league. Not Gronk, but he is one of the best.
Doesn't get
the credit for it.
Doesn't get the credit. I like it, man. That's a good pick. Delaney Walker. Delaney?
I'm going with Delaney.
Walker has turned into one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Here's another question, and this is the one we'll skirt around, but still ask it. What NFL coach is doing the most with the least amount of talent, and what NFL coach is getting the least out of his talent?
Yeah, there are way too many NFL people that listen to this podcast for us to get into that.
It was our chance to humble brag and say, shout out to all of you front office personnel and maybe even some NFL coaches that listen to us every single week. We appreciate the feedback we get when we run into you guys at the NFL Combine. And we're certainly not going to throw anyone under the bus right here. We'll stay objective at all times, but I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. Too many important people listening to this thing. We've got a massive question that I'm going to let Sam handle. Is that now? Do you want to jump into that now?
Oh, yeah. Let's go now.
Again, building off last week, we had the Hail Mary.
This wasn't the Hail Mary guy. This was the guy, though, that asked us last week about Cam Newton's use of the Nerf ball in practice.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Great question. This man now has a track record to live up to. What's his name? I seem to have cut his name off the bottom of this. Constantine. Okay, so he starts this email with, far too often there is confusion on punts and fair catch signals. His point basically is, when you've got gunners sprinting downfield, running as fast as they can, trying to avoid the vice, trying to hold them up, heading directly for that punt returner, it's tough to keep an eye on whether that guy throws his hand in the air for a brief second and waves fair catch. This is a problem. And you're seeing guys barrel into these return guys sometimes, get called for bad penalty, fair catch interference, decleating these guys, when really it's a tough ask to expect this guy to keep their eyes on him the entire time they're running down, trying to avoid the guy blocking them. Harsh, right?
Very, very difficult to do.
The problem is easy to fix, he says, but the fix requires some colorful creativity from the NFL. The punt returner could wear a large, bright, hot pink towel in the backside of his waistband. Upon calling for the fair catch, he throws the towel in the air or on the ground in front of him. Coaches have been wielding and throwing red flags for years, so the pink flag idea wouldn't be that jarring to the NFL ecosystem. It would be something they could adjust to. Also, yay for breast cancer awareness, he says. So he's thinking of the marketing opportunities as well. I like this. The punt returner could also be fitted with button-sensitive flashlights. He says his U.S. Army unit used tack lights on their weapons in combat zones, and it was very useful on night missions to simply squeeze the button-equipped handle below the muzzle to blink on one's flashlight to indicate your location among friendlies or to shed some light on the thing in front of you. A punt returner could wear such a light or strobe on his helmet, his hip, his chest, his shoelaces, and could wear the signal button that activates it on the side of his helmet or belt loop or wrist or whatever. The NFL could even make money with this system, with sponsors and tie-ins in different colors and giving everyone an excuse to discuss the technology involved. Imagine the stadium and broadcast announcing that fair catch was brought to you by Duracell. Then show a 15-second advertisement for batteries and some flashlight tech being used by the post-hurricane rescue workers. The pink towel could also be sponsored, I guess, he says. About time the NFL figured out how to be profitable.
I know, right?
Yeah. So what do we think?
Only they could make some money
I
off
know.
Random ideas.
What do we think about equipping basically making the punt returners high vis is the upshot of all this?
Yeah, we're adding a lot of excitement to a fair catch. And if you look at strategically what the NFL's trying to do, like, hey, let's make the extra points 30 yards instead of 20 yards or whatever it is now, 30 plus. They are trying to make every play exciting. So why not take the fair catch, bring it to the next level? Do you have a preference on this thing? Are you pink towel, or are you intrigued by this flashlight?
I'm very intrigued by strobe lighting. By strobe lighting a punt returner, light him up like a Christmas tree when he signals for fair catch.
Would that be okay in day games? Will it work in day games?
Oh, these things are bright. It's like a flashbang. You want to put out brighter than the sun levels of light with these things, so that there's no ambiguity. When he hits that button, you want to know, no matter where you are in the field, that this guy is signal fair catch.
Yeah, a blind gunner can't tackle you.
Exactly.
Is my thought.
If no other, if no other consequence from this, you're going to see some pretty entertaining gunners just falling about blindly after getting their retinas seared by this strobe light.
Same penalty for throwing the pink flag early or hitting your flashlight early. The false fair catch.
The false fair catch?
I'm sorry, if you hit it and then try to advance the fair catch.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't like blind a guy, call a fair catch, and then try to take it.
That is you signaling fair catch. It's the same penalty. You've just signaled it in a far more authoritative and demonstrable way. You've blinded everybody on the field.
So look, here's my conclusion on this. It tackles two things the NFL's trying to get right, and that is making every play count and player safety. Right? I mean, we are...
Except for the blinding part.
Well, assuming we're not going to blind any retinas, we are going to save that big hit. We're going to cut down on big hits to the head, blows to the head, all that stuff. And, the fair catch, you're looking for a flying pink towel or probably the flashlight. I think I would lean with the flashlight idea, too. Bring the military into it. Honor the military because we're all about that as well. So it's a lot of good.
It's another good idea. This guy's on a roll. Between the Nerf ball and this, I think we're getting somewhere.
Didn't I say the Nerf ball was a stupid idea?
I mean, we decided it wasn't.
Constantine, we appreciate the creativity. That is just fantastic work. I can't wait to see what you have next week. No pressure, but I'm sure there'll be some other great idea next week that'll probably make it on the podcast. We're just changing the game of football here. The game-changing podcast. We good with that one?
Yeah, I like that one.
Satisfactory?
That worked well.
All right, we have a Packers fan here. Is it Callum?
Yep.
Callum. I don't understand. Are these your aliases? He finishes this with love the shows, mostly Sam. What?
I'm just saying. This is. We said we would give the people what they want, and apparently the people love me.
Am I really just second best on this whole thing?
You're too loud. That's the problem. I've been telling you that for a long time.
I can tone it down a notch. You do have a nice
dulcet
soothing...
tones. That's what he said. Dulcet to perfect dulcet tones. In fact, was what he said. Just saying.
You're like the soothing DJ that I listen to as I go to bed, listening to...
Listen to a soothing DJ when you go to bed?
Well, no,
that's quite a breaking news segment of the podcast.
We have Magic 106.7, I think it is. Just the most soothing DJ. Get your classic old tunes. You could be on that show. Anyway, this is a Green Bay Packers fan, Callum, and he said, as a Green Bay Packers fan, we're lucky enough to have started the season with a quarterback who could put the team on his back. He's good. Unfortunately, since then, all of our tackles have died.
Yeah.
With two starters down, first and second backups on IR, and now the third backup, Kyle Murphy, on IR too, will likely be playing with a guy who was on our practice squad and a guy who was on the Cardinals practice squad until Monday against the Bears on Thursday night. So Thursday Night Football, Packers playing the Bears with practice squad tackles. Basically, his question is, what can Green Bay do? What can Mike McCarthy do? How do they scheme around this? How does Aaron Rodgers overcome this? And he specifically asks, how can Aaron Rodgers attempt to overcome a bad line in ways that maybe a Russell Wilson or a Sam Bradford was unable to do so last year?
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on this a few times. The first point, I think, is that there is a level at which you basically can't do anything. If there's a level of bad that your tackles are, even any position on the offensive line, it is going to screw up your offense. So the first part of his question at the end there was, at what point does totally inadequate offensive line play completely torpedo an offense? And what I always come back to with that is, do you remember Bryant McKinney?
Yes.
Bryant McKinney was basically the size of a building, and against most people, he would be able to block them really well and pretty much eliminate them. For a guy that was the size of a house, he could actually move pretty well.
Right.
But there was a certain level of pass rusher that Bryant McKinney could not deal with, and it was typically Dwight Freeney. And that was the big thing about him coming out from college, was that he eliminated everybody, but Dwight Freeney kicked his ass when it was Syracuse against the U. And the same thing...
From a Big East battle.
The same thing happened in the NFL when the Vikings played the Indianapolis Colts and Dwight Freeney would eat Bryant McKinney's lunch. And he would do it so badly that it would completely ruin the Vikings' game plan that week. That one matchup on its own would completely torpedo the offense. And that was, I mean, that's just the most extreme example I can think of, but I think it's a good one because like I said, Brian McKinney was a pretty good player, but he reached a certain level and then just couldn't deal with Dwight Freeney. So and that happens, across the NFL. If a guy is just badly overmatched, he is going to get killed on the edge, and you can't do anything to stop that. You can't do anything to stop that in terms of that one-on-one matchup. The question becomes, what do you then do to try and fix that? Because, you can obviously help a tackle out in terms of, chip blocks out of the backfield, in terms of chip blocks from your tight end before he releases, in terms of just straight double teams, keep the tight end in, go the Houston Texans route and just play your 7-man offensive line. There's a bunch of stuff you can do.
Right.
What I found interesting was our buddy, Jeff Schwartz, mentioned on Twitter that, it was Eric Flowers getting killed on Monday night against the Detroit Lions. And everybody's saying, why doesn't somebody just get this guy some help? And he was saying that, it's not that simple in game. Some teams just don't have these inbuilt protection schemes built in there.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't have this system of chips or anything like this built into the offense, and it's very difficult to sit down in the middle of a game and quickly draw up 5 ways of helping out the left tackle. Like, if you haven't budgeted for this before, if it's not inbuilt in the offense, it's very difficult to throw into the system, at least mid-game. I mean, that may be true. It still seems like a bit of a cop-out in terms of it can't be that hard. Look, if you're running a route to that side, hit the guy on the way out. I mean, that should be easy enough to start doing in the middle of the game. Also, that's only really a problem for that one game where he's getting killed. Like, if you know that your guy is a problem, if you know it's an unfavorable matchup, you should have that in the system, because otherwise you're inviting one of those 6-sack games. You're inviting a Winston Justice game where the guy is just, like, at some point it's not him. You know what I mean? Winston Justice could not block Osi Umenyiora and gave up 6 sacks in the game. After like 3 or 4, those should get charged to the coaching staff.
Right.
Because
it's like you gave up 3 twice.
Exactly. But you gave up 3, at which point
Math.
You are not capable of blocking that guy. And they're still asking you to do it one-on-one. So, there are ways, I think, to help these guys out. As for what the Packers can do about it, I mean, it's an interesting situation because Rodgers holds the ball a long time, always has. He will stress an offensive line. He also helps him out a little bit in terms of being able to move around in the pocket and reset leverage.
Honestly,
and that kind of thing.
What Rodgers does for or against the line is just depends on like your perspective.
Yeah,
of it.
I suspect it's kind of a wash.
It probably is.
What he takes away from them in terms of stressing them out by holding the ball a long time, I think he gives back in terms of moving around and resetting their leverage and that kind of thing.
But it's also like when teams used to rush Johnny Football in college, it was that mush rush, and it's like, don't let him break the pocket. A lot of teams, they're not going all out against Aaron Rodgers. So there are times where he makes them look good, other times he makes them look bad by holding it.
What is going to hurt them, though, is I think it's easier for him to help out an offensive line that's halfway good, because you can't reset a guy's leverage if he's 2 yards behind the guy that just beat him and he's grasping from behind. The best he can do is tackle the guy.
Right.
At least, when Bakhtiari and Bulaga are out there, even when they're kind of beat, they're still in reasonable position. So all he needs to do is to move around a little bit and just reset the leverage. He can't fix the leverage of a guy who's 2.5 yards trailing the play, just picking himself up off the floor, which is going to be your problem here. The one thing we were talking about before the podcast is the Packers seem ridiculously reluctant to do much when it comes to scheming receivers open. It seems to be a lot of, these are the right combinations we run, and if they don't work, we don't really have a plan B. We just have, this is what we run. We expect our receivers to be open, the end.
So that's where I was going to come back to it. And I thought we saw this in 2015. I thought I learned a lot about the NFL in 2015. There were 3 things that happened. Aaron Rodgers lost Jordy Nelson. Tom Brady lost Julian Edelman halfway through the season. And Andy Dalton had the best statistical season of his career. When Rodgers and Brady lost their top 2 receivers, first off, Brady's the guy who gets the ball out of his hand quicker than anybody. And he was holding the ball longer. We had never even seen him do that. And there are times this year where he's done the same thing. With Rodgers, he started playing outside the structure. He just didn't trust the scheme anymore. He's like, hey, I don't have my guy any longer. So what I learned that, and then Andy Dalton was the opposite. He had A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Tyler Eifert had his best season. And Andy Dalton could get rid of the ball quickly, and the quick pass game protected him and protected the offensive line. So I felt like I learned a lot about the NFL that year in that receivers can sometimes dictate pass protection. Now, it will take Green Bay, because they do have Jordy Nelson back, banged up but back. to scheme these guys open, to give Rodgers those quick throws, and Rodgers has to take them. Okay, so he might have to alter the way he plays a little bit and not, have those plays where he's holding the ball for 4 or 5 seconds and trying to extend them as long as he can. You have to have those easier plays. I do think they need to scheme some quick throws open. And then if they're going to take shots down the field, and Rodgers has only attempted, I think it's 10 or 11 deep passes so far this season. It's not a lot. Then it's got to be one of those max protect, those long play actions. I was talking to Zach Robinson about this the other day. They just haven't had those in the offense. And Rodgers needs those because he can hit that 50-yard post. He could create big plays with that, and it just hasn't been a part of the offense really this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch because basically the state of their tackle play at the moment, anybody they go up against is going to be a pretty big mismatch, and we're going to have to see what they do with it.
Yeah, it's going to come down to scheming around it, and Rodgers has to have some level of trust back there. Let's fly through some of these other questions. Before we do, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Draft or Draft.com. So you can go to the App Store, search Draft, download their app. It is fantastic. We're having a ton of fun over here at PFF. A number of different ways to play fantasy football with Draft. They have full season leagues that are best ball, so you don't have to worry about coming back and fixing your roster every week and picking up guys that are on the waiver wire. You've got your team, and it is done for the season. Don't have to worry about injuries or anything. They'll take your best players every single week. Also, a number of other ways to play. There are head-to-head games. There are 2- and 3-player games. There are all sorts of different ways. Games start every couple minutes, so get over there right now. The best thing about it is you guys get to win real money. So it's all real, it's great, and we're going to give you guys a free $3 game once you make your first deposit. Just get over there, use the promo code PFF, and you'll get a free $3 game. If you're into MLB, NBA, NHL, or even golf, you could play over there as well. And there's some tournaments and big, brackets and all sorts of different fun stuff over there. So we get a little excited when we get over to the site and play all these various games every single week. We think you guys will too. So it's over at draft.com or Draft in your app store. Promo code PFF for your first deposit and a free $3 game. All right, let's fly through some more of these questions, Sam. If you're a team like the Jaguars, we got a Jimmy G question from Alexander. Team like the Jaguars seemingly have an elite defense. Do you try and acquire Jimmy G at whatever cost it will make? Whatever it will cost you to make a run. Doubt the Pats will trade him if they think the Jags are a threat, but hypothetically.
I like it. A hypothetical Jags going all in for the Super Bowl question. That happened pretty quickly. That went from 0 to 60 in a hurry.
Jags are 2-1 for the first time since like my 99 Jags when I love those guys.
So I get the broader question is how good is this Jags team? I mean, they absolutely stomped somebody, got stomped, and then stomped somebody again.
I think that they are legitimate on defense. The team that they lost to, Tennessee, also just shut down Seattle.
And does look very good.
And Tennessee looks like one of the best teams in the AFC. I do look at Jacksonville's defense, and I'm not ready to call them the Seattle Seahawks yet. But they're building a similar scheme. They've been trying to build the same scheme for, 5 years now, right? For the first time, they have the pass rushers to get after the quarterback. Starts with Calais Campbell, Dante Fowler's emerging, Yannick Ngakoue, Malik Jackson. They have multiple people. They stunt. They do all these great things up front to create pressure. And then on the back end, Jalen Ramsey playing as well as any corner in the league right now. A.J. Boye's right there with him. Miles Jack starting to play better at linebacker and emerge. There is talent up and down this defense. They're going to be legit this year.
Jalen Ramsey was your stat of the week, right? It was the passer rating that he'd allowed, or was that one of our bonus stats? We definitely mentioned it.
It was, yes. That was
I
on
think
the Monday
the better stat for Jalen Ramsey is that through 3 weeks, he hasn't allowed a pass longer than 8 yards.
My God. Yeah. Unbelievable. And they've attempted a few down the field as well.
Yeah, so he's been legitimately shut down. So the question then is, okay, if this defense is actually that legit, how should they be looking to do something at quarterback beyond just sit and wait until one falls into their lap?
I don't know. It's not a crazy question. It is so tough to just be like, hey, let's just go get Jimmy G and throw him into our system and all that stuff. Look, it was 1 week, but Blake Bortles did look good on Sunday. They are trying to protect him with the run game. He looked a little bit more athletic. Zach and I broke him down in depth. Check that out in the archive. That was yesterday's podcast. We broke down Bortles and everything about his game. But it's still too soon to be like, all right, Bortles figured it out. But when Bortles when they keep the game close, okay, he can be a reasonable game manager. I know it sounds crazy for Blake Bortles, the guy that makes so many bad throws, but I think a big part of him making bad throws, forcing passes into coverage, is because they're playing behind so much. They've put a lot on his plate to be the guy and to win with the passing game. If they can protect him, game like Sunday against the Ravens, he looked pretty good.
Here's the thing. How much do you think it would cost to get Jimmy G? At the very minimum, you're talking a first-round pick plus some, add-ons, third, whatever. It's going to cost you a bunch of draft picks to get Jimmy G over, and then you're going to have to sign him long-term to some sort of monster contract.
It would have to be a massive deal.
Because you've just anointed him as the quarterback of the future. His NFL career is 228 snaps old. That is nothing. Almost. Of those 228 snaps, basically only 144 of them last season last season were good. And of that 144, you're basically talking half a game where he was really good. I mean, he was pretty good in the first game against Arizona. He was really good against Miami and then got hurt.
Yep.
And then basically only played for mop-up duty the rest of the season.
And I know preseason's preseason, but even this year in the preseason, it's not like he's out there just straight dominating every time he goes out there.
So you're talking about a guy whose credentials of being an elite starting quarterback are based off the back of a game and a half, if you're being generous. That is nothing. You can find a game and a half of Mike Glennon looking like Tom Brady.
Look at Josh McCown this last week.
You can find a game and a half of almost anybody in the NFL looking like they're the future, like they are the guy to take you forward. The question is, when you play them for another 10 games, what happens? Because Mike Glennon had the same thing. Mike Glennon has 2 games like that, but he then played long enough to put a bunch of games on tape that were awful. So the hype surrounding Mike Glennon dialed back. But Jimmy G hasn't played long enough to see the bad in there, but it's almost certainly there, at which point, can you really give up a first-round pick, a third-round pick, another couple of picks, and the giant contract it's going to cost to get him? I mean, it's such a gamble.
It's a huge risk. It is a huge risk. I know I've talked to Zach about him a little bit. Zach does believe in his style and his traits and the way he plays and, how much of it is playing in the New England offense, but he has become a much better decision maker. If you watch Jimmy G, his rookie season, really slow release and took forever to get rid of the ball. He's improved in some key areas, at least. So there are some encouraging signs, but to your point, it's still a very small sample size.
To give you some sort of indication for what I'm talking about here, if you took the last 2 games of 2015 and the first 2 games of 2016, Brock Osweiler put better tape down than anything Jimmy G has put on film yet in terms of overall graded throw by throw. He looked very good for 4 games, right? Osweiler then played a bunch more games and looked terrible. At which point, okay, the Texans for some reason still handed him $70-odd million or 38 or whatever it ended up being. But
I don't know. I don't think that at any point I wouldn't say Osweiler looked better than Jimmy G.
So what the grading says, you just don't like the fact that he doesn't have a big arm because he's tall. If he's tall, he should have a big arm.
Yeah, why does he throw so slow?
I don't know.
Osweiler.
Anyway, the point is, if you cut that off at like week 2 of the 2016 season, you would say Osweiler's legit. Osweiler looks like he can get it done. But he couldn't because he played longer than that, and it turns out Osweiler's a bad quarterback.
Yeah, but I watched Osweiler at the end of 2015 and saw a lot of issues as well.
Oh, they were definitely there, but for that, like a 2-game stretch, he played pretty well and then started the season really well for Houston and then gone. Done.
I get your point. No, I get your point. My favorite small sample size, overreaction worked the other way for the Jaguars. They got Fred Taylor out of the deal back in 1997. Rob Johnson had this unbelievable game filling in for Mark Brunell. He was 20 for 24, something ridiculous, right? He threw like 30. He had like 30 NFL passes. They flip him to Buffalo at the end of the year for a first-round pick. Turns into Fred Taylor. Rest is history. Rob Johnson has an average career. Gets Doug Flutie outplays him every time he's on the field. That's my all-time favorite small sample size overreaction.
There's a bunch of them. I mean, there's
Kevin Cobb.
And it's worked both ways. Kevin Cobb, AJ Feely. AJ Feely had like one good game, was supposed to be the future in Philadelphia. There's a bunch of them. I guess if there was some chance of getting Jimmy G for like a second-round pick, it's a gamble worth taking. But it's going to cost you a first plus a bunch of other picks plus the contract. It can't be worth it. You cannot possibly be that certain that Jimmy G is the truth.
Right. No, it's a big risk. So I think your best bet is to continue to try to manage Blake Bortles.
Oh dear.
You have to just keep the game flow for him. Keep the game in hand so he's not going to lose it for you. So, sorry about that. Do you want to answer this Youth Academies one?
Yeah.
Basically a request from Paul in Ontario, Canada. My thought is, why don't NFL teams themselves start youth academies similar to European soccer leagues? This would allow teams to develop players for the professional league that would suit each individual team needs, rather than taking players that have been trained and developed for the college they play for, with no regard for what the NFL needs from a position player.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. The NFL essentially has its youth system outsourced to the NCAA. Players go through high school, they then go into college, and they get developed for the NFL by playing the college game, and then they hit the pros. Completely divorced sometimes from the schemes they're going to be in there. So there's an interesting idea that if the NFL just did that themselves, they'd be able to get these guys, develop them in the right ways, if you like, to how they wanted to see them. But there's a couple of problems with this. One, there's another problem I didn't even think of before, but one, it would cost a huge amount of money. You're talking about NFL teams pull the plug on NFL Europe as a developmental league because it wasn't making its own money back. I mean, can you imagine each NFL team sets up its own youth academy system and starts pumping millions of dollars into that to produce its own players? It's never going to happen. It's not making
safety,
money.
Man.
Yeah,
player
so then
safety.
That was the point that you guys raised. Apparently, you might, endanger the brains of some young people who might never, might never get that back, because apparently you can't just repair brain injury.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
So the brain thing, not a good. Also, I'm pretty sure the NFL has various deals in place with the NCAA that they're not going to just torpedo them and stomp all over their product by creating their own youth system.
You shot the idea down. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
From Canada.
So nice idea, but wrong in several ways.
Have another partner right now for a couple of our podcast friends over at Prediction Machine. This episode is brought to you by PredictionMachine.com. Prediction Machine, a new generation in sports analytics where they play the game 50,000 times before they're actually played. Make better picks with proven data-driven analysis. Subscribe at PredictionMachine.com today and earn a $5 credit that can be used towards the purchase of any package. A couple more questions before we wrap it up. Somebody did ask one that spurred from my wife back during draft season. Mike Renner and I would kind of make up our own scouting terms around the way every week, essentially, for our listeners to use. My wife, Kelly, came up with swerviness. That was her scouting term, and I was like, hey, Christian McCaffrey's got that swerviness. It's not really elusiveness. You just kind of got that feel how to weave through traffic in the defense. So Billy asks, through 3 weeks, who would you give the highest #swerviness rating to? Nominees are Chris Thompson and DeMarco Murray for both showing excellent swerviness on their long plays this last week. I think Murray's was great. He did swerve through the entire Seattle defense. Would you vote Murray? I mean, I like Thompson. I feel like he had multiple swervy plays. But Murray's one play might give him the award.
That seemed to me, as someone who wasn't really in the whole swerviness creation, that seemed to me to typify the ideals that seemed to embody swerviness the best. That run against the Seahawks where he just swerved his way through the entire secondary, all the way down the field, found his block, set them up with a bit of swerving, and got into the end zone. So I think that is the most swervy of the plays we're going to see.
You're using the term properly. Excellent. I will let Kelly know. So 2 more quick questions. One's quick and one's we could talk about a little bit more. Running backs who know they're going to lose yards. This is at ND Carrier. It's like Andy Carrier. You just forgot that. So his name's Andrew.
Also independently asked by Taylor, the podcast producer.
That's true. We've heard this question multiple times. Now, what Andy or Andrew did here is he used the @ in Twitter as the A for his name.
Oh, wow.
So his Twitter handle is just NDY Carrier. So I'm assuming his name's Andy Carrier, and he's using the @ as the A for his name.
That's sneaky.
So I think your name's Andy. Running backs who know they're going to lose yards on sweeps, should they throw the ball out of bounds? And I just keep saying no that would be an illegal man downfield penalty. Your run blockers,
Most
somebody's going to be downfield most of the time. And that's why on reverses and stuff like that, you see that happen. Sometimes on screen passes, if a screen's not there and you don't throw it away quick enough, you have to take the sack. You can't just throw it away because you will pick up a penalty. You'll see that sometimes, and people are like, hey, why'd that idiot take a sack? Should have thrown it away.
It's a weird calculation, trying to figure out which is going to lose you more yardage.
Yeah, you got to be quick in your head. You got to be on the spot quick. All right, let's wrap it up with this one. I think it's a fair question. What can PFF learn from missing on poorly graded college players that turned out to be NFL successes, such as Dak Prescott and Keanu Neal? And I know you might have some strong thoughts on this that we could talk about for quite a while, and about opportunity and different things in the NFL. But for these two examples, and Renner and I did discuss these during draft season. We went through some picks that we hit on in previous years and guys that we missed on. I'll start with the Dak one. Overall grade wasn't great for Dak. It wasn't terrible in college. We certainly weren't expecting this level of success.
I don't think anybody was.
No, I don't think anybody was either.
Kind of statement one on this is that everybody missed on Dak, including the Cowboys, who only drafted him after plans A and B fell through.
Right. The Cowboys very publicly wanted Paxton Lynch.
And then...
or Jared Goff, or Carson Wentz.
No, Connor Cook was their backup plan. So it was Paxton Lynch.
So they also stumbled in.
Yeah, exactly.
Dak.
So everybody missed on Dak Prescott.
I will say, though, when we did go back and look at some of our quarterback charting, there was a very specific thing that Dak was very good at, and that was throwing to, and it sounds simple, but throwing to open receivers, or receivers who had at least a step of separation. He was the best in the class at doing that by far. And I think that's what you learn from these things. You kind of backtrack and say, with PFF, it's not just about this one grade that we throw out there, and it's not going to be this linear or binary. If he's good in college, he'll be good in the NFL. We have 180 fields of data per play in college in the NFL. There's possibly something within that data that will tell a story. And it's not just, will this guy be good or not be good? It's, this guy will be good in this situation and used in this way. So my point is, I think that there's stuff in our data that may have pointed to, in the right situation, Dak can succeed. He was very good at throwing to open receivers, better than anybody else in the class. He had a lot of open receivers last year with Dallas and had a lot of success through 3 weeks. This year, Dak has not been as clean as he was last year. So in theory, the jury's still out. But man, he's already exceeded expectations, not just for us, but for everybody.
Definitely, yeah. I think the overarching point of some of this stuff is 2014 was the first year we graded college football at all. So that draft class was the first time we did anything with any of this stuff.
Right.
So we were completely flying blind in terms of what any of this means. Everybody knows sort of how to scout in the traditional sense. We look for traits, we try and project that forward into NFL, and we pick the players we like.
Right.
Fine, everyone can do that. We then come along, we grade players every single play-by-play grading, and we have this entire data set for college, and we need to try and figure out what parts of this mean anything. To what extent is a guy who grades well in college going to project forward into the NFL? To what extent does it just pick up where it left off, Joey Bosa style? And to what extent do other things factor in there? And are there bits of data that we collect that point to those things that aren't just part of the grading?
And which positions?
Yeah, exactly.
Which position? Because each position is going to have something that might translate more directly than others.
This past few years is just all a big learning process for us. We're trying to figure out where these things actually factor in, what projects where, how things relate to the NFL. Are there trends you can spot? Are there areas where we can see things that NFL guys can't because they're just looking at this data set? And it's why so much of our draft takes are they're posing questions more than saying this is this. You see the thing that drives me nuts the most about draft season generally is the declarative nature of all these statements.
Oh, right.
This guy cannot do this. This guy will not be this. This guy will. You don't know. Nobody knows. We're all working for various levels of educated guessing. So what we're doing is we're coming at it from a completely different starting point to everyone else and just asking some questions. Saying, right. Okay, well, you guys think this guy's a nobody. This grading and these bits of data actually say that he's done really well in college. Are we sure? Does this guy actually have some traits that will work in the NFL? And, The NFL has missed on some guys. We've definitely missed on some guys. I think we've also found some guys that the NFL weren't interested in. And then I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle where we need to try and figure out, are we looking at the right things? Which things should we be looking at? I think it's still, it's year 3. We're still learning about this stuff, and we're still trying to dial in exactly what means what.
Yeah, it's about which parts of the data are going to help you the most. I would say we haven't done a deep dive study into what our hits and misses, but just eyeballing things, what I've seen is guys at the top end of our range grade-wise have performed well in the NFL.
Yeah.
No matter where they've been drafted, from your Grady Jarrett 5th-round pick to Trey Flowers 4th-round pick, especially in the trenches, especially on the defensive line. There's a lot more interactions there. When we're charting every single play and a guy grades well, over time, that's a massive sample size of, hey, Joey Bosa dominated in college. He'll probably be pretty good in the NFL. So I would say our high-end guys have looked good. Our low-end guys, your Jeremiah Patassis on the offensive line, your Willie Beavers on the offensive line, those guys,
Christian McCaffrey,
are out of the league quickly. What about McCaffrey? That
low end of the scale.
Of what?
Grading, football,
Christian
throwing the ball. Not McCaffrey. Hackenberg. I'm getting my Christians mixed up.
I'm wondering why you were trashing
writing Christian McCaffrey off.
Player.
Bum. Guy's a loser.
Why would you trash your favorite player?
No, Hackenberg.
Christian Hackenberg, another guy is at the very, very low end of the scale. So if you were an NFL team looking at PFF data and you were just looking at our grades, didn't even have access to the database, you could comfortably say right now, let me really take a look at these guys at the top end and the guys at the bottom end and trust PFF on those guys to a point. Now, the guys in the middle, like you said, there's been varying degrees and there's more information there, but at the very least, I feel like our top and bottom have been very good. And at the very least, we could have saved a lot of bad picks for the NFL. I want to address the Keanu O'Neal thing. We did, and again, I addressed this back during draft season. The safety position and the linebacker position, I would say, are two that are very dependent on usage pattern in the NFL and college. But there's also this element, I think, where athleticism might play a little bit more of a role. So we've had some productive linebackers who maybe weren't great athletes, who didn't show well in the NFL. We've had some unproductive college linebackers and safeties who went to the NFL and had some success. With Keanu O'Neal, I think his was role. He got thrown into this perfect role, and credit Atlanta for saying he is a strong safety in the scheme that we're trying to play. And he fits it really well. He's a big hitter, and they can put him in the box. He's still not a perfect player, but we graded him playing a lot of free safety at Florida. A lot of free safety. He had a ton of missed tackles, bad missed.
So this is like the Landon Collins thing in New York. We essentially graded rookie year Landon Collins in terms of role, playing deep off the line, doing all the things he's not good at doing.
He graded horribly for us.
Comes to the NFL, and he's now year 2 Landon Collins. He's now got the role that he's supposed to be doing, and suddenly, Landon Collins looks like Defensive Player of the Year. For Keanu O'Neal, it makes him go from poorly graded, bad player to actually looks pretty viable. The guy, I think you're right. The use thing is huge. And that's one of the big X factors in all this stuff. It's where these guys are going to land. It's not just, can they do X in the NFL? Can they play? Because it's not a level playing field. It's can you do this set of things that they're going to ask you to do? Can you do the other? The guy, Keanu O'Neal ended up in the right system. I think the jury's also out a little bit on him in terms of he was really good last year. He hasn't been as good this year. I think we may see him settle down a little closer to average than really good.
Well, grade-wise last year, too. He forced, I think it was 5 fumbles.
Yeah, so that is
going to really elevate your grade. We do give a lot of credit for causing turnovers or turnover-worthy plays, but for the defense, those are tough to sustain. As big of a hitter as he is, and as good as he is at, it's tough to have 4 or 5 of those every single season.
The guy I think that's actually a better example for just pure miss is his teammate Deion Jones, because I think we can kind of look at Keanu O'Neal and there's a bunch of things we can point to explain it and to understand why that happened. We can give with Deion Jones, I don't think we have any idea. You look at this guy and he was just not good in college and goes to the NFL and literally you're just talking about an athlete. We've got an athlete here and somehow he's turned into a really good football player. And he's the guy I think that's far harder to explain.
So that's where I think you learned. I think you figure out which positions can guys take massive steps at. We could probably do a little bit more looking at age. You can do a little bit, definitely comparing athleticism and where guys can take those big steps. So, hey, it's a good question. It's something we're always looking to learn. I think that's what the evaluation process is all about. It's turning into maybe my favorite show of the week, Sam. We get to answer, freestyle a little bit, answer some random questions, change the game of football.
That's the important part.
With Hail Marys and fair catches.
And strobe lighting for punt returners.
It only happens with you guys. I'm very impressed with our listeners through a couple weeks. They're answering the call. They're sending us great questions. You guys are fueling this episode, so hit us up on Twitter if you guys have more questions or comments or anything. Whatever you're feeling, we can get it on the show at PFF_Steve, at PFF_Sam. And, of course, podcasts at ProFootballFocus.com is where you guys can email us your questions. We had a ton of email questions this week. We apologize if we didn't get to yours, but please keep them coming. The best ones will make the show. Don't forget to stay with us this entire week. Hit that subscribe button for the PFF podcast. 4 big episodes all week. This is number 3. Number 4 will be the preview for Week 4 of the NFL season live from Queen City Radio here in Cincinnati. Also, if you guys want to take a look at the Pro Football Focus products, the best place to go, profootballfocus.com/PFF-offers. That is where we have our very best offers for our products, particularly PFF Edge. I promise you won't be disappointed with the options that you have there. PFF-offers. Go and check it out. All right, guys, we will see you for Week 4 preview with the great Mike Renner returning for the 3-man booth. We'll talk to you then.